A 3-year-old girl just dialed the only number saved with a star on her mother's phone. His phone rang on a Thursday in October, 2:47 in the morning. The kind of hour where nothing good ever follows a vibrating screen on a nightstand. Carrick Dunn stared at the ceiling of his apartment in the dark, the blue glow of the unknown number cutting through the room like a blade. He almost didn't answer. He'd trained himself not to answer unknown numbers. Telemarketers, scammers, bill collectors from a life he'd rather forget. But something in his chest shifted, some nameless gravity that pulled his hand toward the phone before his brain could intervene. He pressed the green button. Silence first. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Then breathing, small breathing. The shallow, hiccuping rhythm of a child who has been crying for a long time and has now entered that terrifying calm on the other side of panic. A voice, tiny, trembling, barely a whisper. And then 3 words that would shatter 4 years of silence in a single sentence. For 4 years, this man played a voicemail every single night from a woman who told him never to call again. 37 seconds of her voice saying goodbye. 37 seconds that had become more real than his actual life. He had memorized every breath, every pause, every crack in her voice, where the words almost broke but didn't. Then, a 3-year-old girl pressed the star on her mother's phone, and his number came up. What happened next will change the way you think about love, loss, and the people we let go too soon. Have you ever held on to something from someone who left? A text message you scroll back to at 2 a.m. when the apartment feels too quiet. A voicemail you've memorized so completely you could recite it backwards. A photograph you tell yourself you'll delete tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. Have you ever replayed a moment so many times it stopped feeling like the past and started feeling like the present? Then you understand what this man was living in. A 37-second loop, every single night, for 4 years. But here's the question no one was asking. Why did she leave his number as the emergency contact? Why, after 4 years of silence, after telling him never to look for her, did Sable Elliston make sure that if something happened to her, his phone would ring? And who was on the other end of that call? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to a Chick-fil-A drive-thru, a spilled coffee, and a woman in scrubs with cartoon dogs on them, who looked at him with the kind of honesty most people spend their whole lives avoiding. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. We tell stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. If this story moves you the way it moved us, drop a like right now, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into it. The voicemail is 37 seconds long. Carrick knows this because he has counted so many times that the number has stopped being a measurement and started being a heartbeat. 37 seconds, the length of a television commercial, the time it takes to boil water for instant coffee, the distance between pressing play and feeling his chest collapse into itself like a house with no foundation. He plays it every night at 11:47 p.m., not because the time means anything, but because rituals need structure, and structure is the only thing keeping him from falling apart completely. The phone sits on his nightstand. An old iPhone he refuses to upgrade because the voicemail lives there, saved in a folder he has backed up to 3 separate hard drives and 1 cloud account he checks weekly to make sure it still exists. He picks it up. He presses play. And for 37 seconds, Sable Elliston is alive again. Carrick. Her voice comes through the speaker like smoke, like something you can almost touch but never hold. She says his name the way she always said it, with the emphasis on the second syllable, turning it into something musical. I need you to listen to me, and I need you not to call back. There's noise in the background. A restaurant, maybe. Glasses clinking, someone laughing. The sound of a life happening around her while she stands somewhere private. Somewhere she has carved out just for this call. I'm not in trouble. I need you to hear that. I'm not in danger. But I can't explain what's happening, and I can't stay. I know that doesn't make sense. I know you're going to replay this and try to find the thing I'm not saying. But there isn't a hidden message. There's just this. Her breath catches, the first crack in her composure. Carrick has memorized this moment so thoroughly that he can feel it in his own chest, the hitch of air, The way her throat must have tightened around words she didn't want to say. I loved you. I love you. Both of those things are true, and they don't contradict each other, even though I know it feels like they do. But I can't be the person you need right now. And if I stay, I'll destroy something I can't live with destroying. The garlic chicken line comes next. It's the part that breaks him every time. The part that proves she was still her even in this moment of leaving. I'm standing outside a restaurant that smells like garlic chicken, and all I can think about is that night you tried to make garlic chicken and set off 3 smoke alarms and we had to eat cereal on the porch in our underwear. I don't know why I'm telling you that. I guess I just need you to know that the memories aren't going away. I'm taking them with me. All of them. 37 seconds. He's at 29 now. 8 seconds left of her. Don't look for me, please. Not because I don't want to be found, but because finding me won't give you what you're looking for. I'm not the same person you fell in love with. I'm becoming someone else. And I don't know yet if she's someone worth knowing. The final breath. The final word. Goodbye, Carrick. Silence. He lies in the dark with the phone still pressed to his ear, the screen glowing against his cheek. The bed beside him is empty. It has been empty for 4 years. The sheets on her side are still the same ones they bought together at that overpriced linen store, where she convinced him that thread count actually mattered. He washes them. He makes the bed. He never sleeps on that side. Carrick Dunn is 33 years old. He owns a construction company in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of small operation that lives and dies by word of mouth and the strength of his handshake. He built it from nothing after Sable left, pouring every hour he would have spent with her into concrete and lumber and blueprints that didn't ask questions. The business cards say, Done Right Construction. The name was Sable's idea. He kept it anyway. 3 things matter to him now. His sister Odessa, who calls every Sunday whether he answers or not. His work, which gives his hands something to do when his mind won't stop replaying. And this voicemail, which has become less of a message and more of a room he visits, a place where she still exists in present tense. He bought a house last year, the house they were supposed to buy together, with the down payment they had saved in a joint account she never touched when she left. 3 bedrooms. A kitchen with a gas stove because she loved cooking with open flame. A backyard big enough for the dog they had talked about getting. The kitchen never smells like garlic anymore. He remembers a night at a gas station parking lot, 6 months before she left. They had driven 2 hours to watch a meteor shower that never happened, clouds rolling in and swallowing the sky. They sat on the hood of his truck, eating gas station hot dogs and talking about nothing and everything. Promise me something, she had said, her head on his shoulder, her voice soft with something he couldn't name. Anything? Promise me you'll never become someone I don't recognize. He had laughed. What does that even mean? It means stay you. Stay the guy who writes his number on Chick-fil-A receipts. Stay the guy who knows the names of his entire crew's kids. Stay the guy who believes people are basically good even when they give you every reason not to. I promise, he had said, and he meant it. But the promise works both ways. And she became someone he didn't recognize. She became a voicemail and a vanishing act and a question mark he has been living inside for 4 years. He still doesn't drink. 2 years sober before he met her. 6 years sober now. The bottle had been his way of disappearing, and she had been his reason to stay visible. When she left, he thought about reaching for it again. The thought lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, he started a company instead. Destruction or creation. Those were the only 2 options. He chose creation. His routine is simple now. Wake at 5:30, job site by 6:15, home by 7, dinner alone. Television he doesn't watch. And then, 11:47, the voicemail. 37 seconds. Sleep, if it comes. People ask him why he still listens to it. His therapist, the one he saw for 8 months before deciding he wasn't ready to stop hurting. His sister, who once threatened to smash his phone against a wall if he played it one more time in front of her. Huck, his foreman, who has known him long enough to say the hard things without apology. Why do you keep doing that to yourself, man? She's gone. Let her be gone. Carrick never knows how to answer. How do you explain that the voicemail isn't torture? That it's the opposite? That for 37 seconds, he gets to live in a world where Sable Elliston still loves him enough to explain herself? Where she's not dead, not lost, not erased, just somewhere else, carrying his memories with her. Why does he keep listening? Because it's the only place where she still loves him. The day he met Sable Elliston started with a phone call from Odessa and ended with a dented silver Civic in a Chick-fil-A parking lot. It was March, cold enough to need a jacket, warm enough to resent it. Carrick had been awake since 4 a.m., staring at ceiling cracks that looked different every night, waiting for the sun to give him permission to move. The site inspection was at 7:30, a new build in West Asheville, 3-story residential, the kind of project that could make or break his year depending on whether the city inspector had eaten breakfast before showing up. His phone rang at 6:15. "Odessa, Mom called me last night." 4 words, each one landing like a stone dropped into still water. What did she want? Carrick asked, though he already knew. Vera Dunn only called when she needed something. Money, a place to stay, someone to tell her that her choices weren't her fault. The usual. She's in Raleigh now. New boyfriend. Said she's getting her life together. Wants to reconnect. Odessa's voice was flat, the way it always got when she was trying not to feel. "I told her to lose my number." "Good. Is it?" A pause, because now I feel like garbage, and I hate that she can still do that. That she can call once every 3 years and make me feel like the bad guy for not wanting to hear it. Carrick pressed his palm against his forehead. He didn't have time for this. He didn't have the emotional bandwidth for this. But Odessa was the only family he had that mattered, and Vera was the wound that never closed for either of them. "You're not the bad guy," he said. "She doesn't get to show up when it's convenient and expect a welcome mat. You're allowed to protect yourself." What if I'm protecting myself from the wrong thing? What if she's actually changed this time? Has she ever changed before? Silence. Then a small, broken laugh. "No." "Then trust your gut. Your gut knows." He said goodbye. He grabbed his keys. He drove to the Chick-fil-A on Tunnel Road because he hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and his stomach was making sounds that weren't compatible with professional authority. The drive-through line was 14 cars deep. He parked and went inside. That's when it happened. He was walking back to his truck, coffee in one hand, breakfast sandwich in the other, running through the inspection checklist in his head, when a silver Civic reversed directly into his left knee. The impact wasn't hard enough to break anything, just hard enough to send his coffee flying, splattering across his shirt and jacket in a pattern that looked like a Rorschach test for bad days. Just hard enough to make him drop his sandwich into a puddle of parking lot runoff. Just hard enough to make him shout a word his mother would have washed his mouth out for saying. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman in scrubs covered with cartoon dogs, golden retrievers, beagles, one poodle that looked vaguely offended by its own existence. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with dark brown hair escaping from a ponytail that had clearly given up on its original shape hours ago. Her eyes were the color of coffee with too much cream, and they were wide with horror as she took in the scene. The coffee, the puddle, the sandwich, him. "Oh my God," she said. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I was reaching for a fry, one single fry. It fell between the seats and I was trying to grab it and I took my foot off the brake. And I didn't see you. And now you're covered in coffee. And I've probably bruised your kneecap. And this is officially the worst morning of my entire life." She said all of this in one breath. No pauses, no punctuation. Just a flood of words delivered at a speed that suggested her brain moved faster than most people's. Carrick stared at her. His knee was throbbing. His shirt was ruined. His sandwich was floating in a puddle like the world's saddest breakfast casualty. And then she laughed. Not at him, at herself, at the absurdity of the moment, at the fry that had caused an international incident, at the fact that she was standing in a parking lot at 6:45 in the morning, wearing scrubs with cartoon dogs on them, and trying to explain vehicular assault to a stranger covered in his own beverage. The laugh did something to him. It cracked something open. It made him realize that he could choose to be angry, or he could choose to see what she was seeing, the ridiculous comedy of being alive and having everything go wrong at once. He laughed too. Was it at least a good fry? He asked, She stopped laughing. Her eyes met his, and something clicked into place that he had no framework for, like a lock he didn't know existed suddenly finding its key. "It was a waffle fry," she said. "So yes, worth the felony." Her name was Sable. Like the animal, she explained, but less bitey. She offered to buy him a new coffee and sandwich. He said that wasn't necessary. She insisted. He discovered that arguing with her was pointless because she simply continued talking until the other person gave up. They sat in a corner booth for 45 minutes. He missed his sight inspection. He didn't care. She was 26, a pediatric nurse at Mission Hospital. She had been working nights for 3 years and had recently switched to days, which explained why she looked like she hadn't slept since the Clinton administration. Her father's name was Mercer, and she spoke about him with a warmth that made Carrick's chest ache in ways he didn't want to examine. "He raised me after my mom left," she said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "I was 9. She just walked out one morning, said she was going to the store, never came back. Mercer handled everything, school forms, doctor's appointments, teaching me how to drive, explaining why boys were idiots, all of it. He's the best man I know." Something flickered in her eyes when she said it, a shadow that passed too quickly to identify, but Carrick noticed. He filed it away in a corner of his mind, a question he didn't know how to ask yet. "What about your family?" she asked. He gave her the short version, the version that didn't include the ketchup packets and the forged signatures, and the nights he sat outside Odessa's bedroom door, listening to her cry herself to sleep because their mother had promised to call and hadn't. "My sister," he said. "She's the only family that matters." Sable nodded, like she understood, like she recognized the shape of his silence, and decided not to push. "I should probably let you go," she said, glancing at the time on her phone. "You've got a job to get to. And I've got a 12-hour shift that's going to feel like 48 after this much excitement." She stood up, extended her hand. He took it. Her hands were disproportionately warm, like someone had left them on a radiator for too long, like they had been designed to comfort small, scared children in hospital beds. "I'm Sable," she said again, even though she had already told him. "Carrick," he said. "I know," she smiled. "It was on the receipt I almost ran you over with." She walked out. He watched her go. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the empty space in his chest felt a little less empty. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the beginning of everything he didn't know he wanted, and everything he was about to lose. 6 months passed before Carrick said, "I love you." Not because he didn't feel it. He felt it by the second week, when she showed up at his job site with coffee for his entire crew, and remembered that Huck's daughter had a dance recital that weekend. He felt it by the 3rd month, when she fell asleep on his couch mid-sentence and he sat there for an hour watching her breathe, terrified by how much her presence had come to mean. He didn't say it because the words had been ruined for him, corrupted by repetition. "I love you" had never been a gift in his house growing up. It had been a currency, a transaction. A thing Vera Dunn said right before she needed something, right before she borrowed money she would never pay back, right before she disappeared for 3 months and left 2 children to figure out dinner on their own. "I love you" meant, "I'm about to hurt you." That was the translation his nervous system had learned, and no amount of therapy or self-awareness could fully rewrite it. Sable never pushed. She never demanded definitions or timelines or the words that other women might have required. She just showed up, again and again, with a consistency so relentless it almost felt like violence, like she was methodically dismantling every wall he had built by simply refusing to acknowledge they existed. She left notes in his truck, small folded pieces of paper tucked under the visor. "Hope your inspection goes well. Thinking about you. You're doing better than you think." He saved every single one in a shoebox in his closet that he told himself was embarrassing but couldn't bring himself to throw away. She learned the names of his entire crew. Not just Huck, the foreman, all of them. Miguel, who sent money home to his mother in Oaxaca every month. Davis, who was putting his wife through nursing school and worked doubles without complaint. Jerome, who had been with Carrick since the beginning and never let him forget it. She brought birthday cards for their kids. She remembered anniversaries. She showed up at the hospital when Davis's wife had a pregnancy scare and sat with her for 4 hours while Carrick and Davis pretended to work and checked their phones every 30 seconds. Huck pulled Carrick aside one afternoon. They were standing in the skeleton of a house surrounded by raw timber and the smell of sawdust. The kind of moment that usually meant a conversation about load-bearing walls or permit delays. "Your girl," Huck said. "She's either a saint or she's playing a long game I'm too dumb to see." Carrick frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that she knows my daughter's name. She knows what grade she's in. She asked about her science project last week. Nobody does that. Nobody cares that much about people who aren't their people. Maybe she's just kind." Huck studied him. Huck had 20 years on Carrick, and the kind of face that had seen everything and chosen not to be surprised by any of it. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe she's the real thing, and you're waiting for her to prove she isn't, because that's what you're used to." The words landed somewhere deep, somewhere Carrick didn't want to look, because Huck was right. Every act of kindness Sable performed, every thoughtful gesture, every moment of patience, when he pulled away without explanation, triggered a whisper inside him. A broken, frightened whisper that said, "Nobody's just like that. There's always a cost. There's always a moment when the sweetness curdles and you see the real face underneath." That was Vera's legacy. The certainty that love was a trap. That the more beautiful something seemed, the more devastating its eventual betrayal. It took Mercer to change his mind. Sable brought him to her father's house for dinner on a Sunday in October. A small craftsman bungalow in Montford with a porch that needed painting, and a garden that had clearly been loved by someone who understood the difference between tending and controlling. Mercer met them at the door. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a way that suggested a lifetime of physical work. Grey hair cropped close, hands thick with calluses, eyes that missed nothing. He shook Carrick's hand with a grip that communicated something, not hostility, but assessment, evaluation. The handshake of a man deciding whether you were worth the space you occupied. The dinner was pot roast, potatoes, green beans from the garden, simple food, prepared with the confidence of someone who had been cooking alone for a long time and had learned to enjoy it. The conversation was careful. Carrick answered questions about his business, his background, his plans. Mercer listened more than he spoke, nodding occasionally, his expression revealing nothing. Sable watched them both with visible anxiety. Her foot bounced under the table. Her laughter was slightly too loud. She kept refilling everyone's water glasses, even when they didn't need refilling. After dinner, she excused herself to make coffee. Mercer leaned back in his chair and studied Carrick across the table. "She's nervous," Mercer said. "Not a question. She wants us to get along." "We'll get along fine. That's not what she's nervous about." Mercer paused. "She's nervous because you're the first person she's brought home in 4 years, and the last one didn't end well." Carrick didn't know what to say to that. He hadn't known there had been someone before. Sable had mentioned past relationships in the vaguest possible terms, a landscape painted without detail. "He's quiet when he's deciding about someone," Sable had said on the drive over, and now Carrick understood what she meant. Mercer was deciding, right now, whether Carrick was the kind of man who stayed or the kind who left. The drive home was quiet. The mountains rose dark against a darker sky, and the road wound through them like a river through a canyon. Carrick's hands were tight on the wheel, his mind replaying every moment of the evening, every word he had said, every silence that might have communicated something he didn't intend. He pulled over without planning to. A scenic overlook. The valley spread out below them, lights scattered like embers, the city glowing soft and distant. Sable turned to him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. You pulled over in the middle of nowhere. Something's wrong." He looked at her, at the way the dashboard light caught the edge of her cheekbone, at the small furrow between her eyebrows that appeared whenever she was worried, at this woman who had spent 6 months showing up for him without asking for anything in return. "I love you," he said. The words came out rougher than he intended. Unpolished. Raw. Sable's eyes widened. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached over and took his hand. placed it against her chest, pressed his palm flat against her heartbeat. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you." "Again. I love you." She closed her eyes. Her heart pounded against his hand, fast and unsteady, and he realized with sudden clarity that she had been waiting for this, that she had been as terrified as he was, that her patience wasn't fearlessness. It was faith. Faith that he would eventually trust her enough to say the words. "I need to hear it enough times that I believe it," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. She was broken too, not in the same ways he was, not with the same cracks and fractures, but broken, carrying something heavy from before him, waiting for someone to prove that love didn't always end in leaving. "I love you," he said again, and again, and again, until the words stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling true. For the first time in his adult life, the word didn't taste like a lie. Odessa was 24 years old when she met Sable, and she walked into that dinner with the energy of a woman who had already decided the verdict. Carrick's sister was beautiful in the way thunderstorms are beautiful, arresting and dangerous and impossible to look away from. Dark hair that fell past her shoulders, eyes that could shift from warm to glacial in the space between heartbeats, a smile that charmed and a silence that warned. She moved through the world like someone who had learned early that softness was a vulnerability and had armored herself accordingly. She had agreed to the dinner only because Carrick had asked 3 times. The first 2 times she had invented excuses, a work deadline, a headache, a vague sense of not being in the mood. The third time she had sighed into the phone and said, "Fine, but if she's boring, I'm leaving before dessert." Sable was not boring. The restaurant was mid-range Italian, checkered tablecloths, candles that smelled like vanilla, the kind of place that tried hard to feel romantic and mostly succeeded. Sable arrived first, nervous in a way Carrick had never seen her, adjusting her earrings and checking her reflection in the window. "She's your only family," Sable had said that morning. "If she hates me, what does that mean for us?" "She won't hate you," Carrick had promised. He was wrong. Odessa walked in 12 minutes late, which was either accidental or strategic, depending on how generous you felt. She smiled at Sable. She complimented her dress. She asked about her work at the hospital with what appeared to be genuine interest. She laughed at Sable's jokes. She ordered wine for the table without asking. She was, by every measurable standard, perfectly pleasant. Carrick watched them talk and felt something in his chest loosen. This was going to be fine. Odessa was going to see what he saw. She was going to understand. Then Sable went to the bathroom. The mask came off the moment she was out of sight. Odessa's smile vanished. Her eyes hardened. She leaned across the table with the intensity of someone delivering classified information. "She's performing." Carrick frowned. "What?" "Sable, your girlfriend. She's performing. Every laugh is slightly too loud. Every compliment is slightly too specific. She's working the room, Carrick. She's working me. And I can see it because I've done it 1,000 times. You're imagining things." "I'm not." Odessa's voice was flat, certain. "Nobody's that good. Nobody shows up with birthday cards for your crew's kids and memorizes their spouse's names unless they're building something. The sweetest ones are the most strategic. Mom taught us that." The mention of Vera landed like a slap. Carrick felt his jaw tighten. "Sable is nothing like Mom." Odessa flinched. The reaction was tiny, a flicker around her eyes, a momentary softening of her armor. But Carrick saw it. He saw the wound beneath the accusation. "I didn't say she was like Mom," Odessa said quietly. "I said she was performing. Those aren't the same thing." "Then what are you saying?" Sable was coming back. Carrick could see her weaving through the tables, that warm smile already reassembling itself. He had maybe 15 seconds. Odessa leaned closer. Her voice dropped to something almost pleading. "I'm saying that you're the only family I have. You're the only person who has never left, and I can't lose you to someone who won't love you as much as I do. I can't watch you build a life with someone who might be pretending, someone who might be calculating, someone who might wake up one morning and decide that she doesn't want this anymore and walk out the door like it was nothing." She stopped. Her eyes were wet. She looked away, furious at herself for the vulnerability. "That's what I'm saying," she finished. Sable returned to the table. The conversation resumed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and undercurrents that only Carrick could feel. He replayed Odessa's words for days afterward. The anger, the accusation, the fear dressed up as suspicion. He told himself she was projecting. He told himself she was letting Vera's shadow fall over someone who didn't deserve it. But there was something else there, something he had failed to hear in the moment. Odessa wasn't attacking Sable. She was begging Carrick not to disappear. She was 14 years old when Vera left for good. Carrick had been 23, old enough to sign paperwork, old enough to forge the signatures they needed, old enough to learn how to braid hair at 2 a.m. from YouTube tutorials because Odessa had a picture day the next morning and their mother was gone and he was all she had left. He had raised her, not officially, not in a way that anyone would have recognized or compensated, but he had shown up every night, every crisis, every screaming match and silent treatment and moment when she pushed him away to see if he would leave like everyone else. He never left. And now here was Sable, this woman who had appeared out of nowhere, who had wedged herself into every corner of his life, who was taking up space in a heart that had always belonged to Odessa first. He should have heard what his sister was really saying. He should have recognized the terror underneath the accusation, the grief of a girl who had been abandoned so many times that anyone near her brother felt like a threat. But he didn't hear it. He heard criticism. He heard judgment. He heard someone telling him that the best thing in his life was secretly the worst thing. And so the fracture began. Not a break, not yet. Just a hairline crack. The kind of damage that doesn't show on the surface. The kind that spreads slowly, invisibly, until one day the whole structure gives way and everyone wonders how they missed the signs. Carrick chose Sable. He didn't realize he was choosing. He didn't realize that love could become a zero-sum game. But every defended dinner, and every dismissed concern, and every conversation where he told Odessa that she was being paranoid, those were choices. Tiny choices. Each one driving a wedge between him and the only family that had never let him down. He would come to regret it. All of it. But not until it was too late to take any of it back. He carried the ring in his jacket pocket for 3 weeks. It was a simple thing. A thin gold band with a small diamond, the kind of ring that looked almost apologetic next to the massive stones other women wore. But Sable had told him once, on a walk through downtown, that she hated the trend of engagement rings that looked like they required insurance policies and security details. "I want something I can wear while scrubbing in," she had said. "Something that feels like it belongs on my hand, not my hand belonging to it." He remembered everything she said. He catalogued it all, storing her preferences in mental filing cabinets, building a map of who she was and what she wanted. The ring was perfect. He was certain of it. What he wasn't certain of was the moment. He wanted it to be right. He had planned and replanned, considered and reconsidered. A hike to a waterfall, a dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first real date, a quiet morning in bed, just the two of them, before the world woke up. Every option felt either too cliché or too underwhelming, too much or not enough. 3 weeks of carrying that ring. 3 weeks of waiting for a perfection that refused to arrive. Then Elijah died. Sable called him from the hospital at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. He answered on the first ring because he always answered on the first ring for her. She was crying. Not the soft, controlled crying she sometimes did when patients had hard days. This was something else. Something broken. "There was a boy," she said, 7 years old. "His name was Elijah. He came in with pneumonia 3 days ago. We thought he was going to be fine. Everyone thought he was going to be fine. But it turned septic and his organs started failing. And we did everything, Carrick. We did everything. But he died. He died an hour ago, and I can't stop seeing his face." "Where are you?" "Outside, on the bench by the ambulance bay. I couldn't stay inside anymore. I couldn't look at the room where he—" Her voice broke. Carrick was already grabbing his keys. "I'm coming." He found her on a metal bench in the rain. It had started somewhere between his apartment and the hospital, a cold October drizzle that seemed designed to make everything worse. Sable sat there in her scrubs, soaked through, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her pieces together. He sat down beside her. He didn't have an umbrella. He didn't care. He wanted to know if heaven has Wi-Fi, she said. Her voice was hollow. That's what he asked his mom 3 days ago. Does heaven have Wi-Fi? Because I want to play Minecraft with my friends, even if I'm a ghost. 7 years old. That's what he was worried about. Video games and his friends. He wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to go home and play video games and grow up and be somebody. Carrick put his arm around her. She leaned into him, shivering. His favorite dinosaur was the Ankylosaurus, she continued. He told me that on the first day. Because of the tail. He said it was like having a built-in weapon, and he wished he had a built-in weapon so he could fight all his bad cells. Her shoulders shook. The rain kept falling. Carrick reached into his pocket. His fingers found the ring. The ring he had been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. This wasn't perfect. This was rain and grief, and the smell of antiseptic still clinging to her hair. This was a woman falling apart on a hospital bench because a 7-year-old boy with a favorite dinosaur had stopped breathing. But maybe perfect was the wrong thing to wait for. Maybe the right moment wasn't about setting or circumstance. Maybe it was about truth, about being present when someone needed you most. He pulled out the ring. Sable. She looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. Mascara tracked down her cheeks in dark rivers. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I know this isn't how it happens in the movies, he said. And I know you're broken right now, but I've been carrying this ring for 3 weeks waiting for some magical, perfect moment, and I just realized that I don't want magical. I want real. I want this. I want you, even when it's raining and you smell like hospital and you're crying because the world is unfair and children die and there's nothing any of us can do about it. She stared at the ring, then at him, then at the ring again. I smell like hospital, she said. I don't care. I've been crying for 2 hours. I'll hold you for the next 2, and the 2 after that, for as long as you need. This is the worst possible timing. Then we'll tell people it happened somewhere beautiful. We'll make up a story about a sunset and a beach and a perfect moment that never existed. But between us, it happened here, in the rain, on a hospital bench, because that's real. That's who we are. She reached out, took the ring, held it up to the dim light bleeding from the ambulance bay. It was small and simple and absolutely right. Yes, she said. She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. The engagement dinner happened 2 weeks later. Mercer's house again. The same craftsman bungalow with the porch that needed painting. This time there was champagne, and Sable's laughter ringing through the rooms, and a warmth that felt like the beginning of something instead of the middle. But near the end of the evening, Mercer pulled Carrick aside. They stood on the back porch. The garden was dark, but Carrick could smell the remains of summer roses mixed with the decay of autumn leaves. Mercer handed him a glass of bourbon and leaned against the railing. "You love my daughter," Mercer said. Not a question. More than anything. Mercer nodded slowly. He was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that meant he was choosing his words with precision. "Sable carries things deep and quiet," he said finally. "She gets that from Renata, her mother, and Renata carried things so deep that one day she couldn't carry them anymore and she left. Walked out when Sable was 9, just gone, no explanation, no goodbye, just a note that said, 'I'm sorry,' and an empty closet." Carrick held his breath. "She won't tell you when she's sinking," Mercer continued. "That's what you need to understand. She won't come to you with her problems like a normal person. She'll keep making dinner and packing lunches and sending cards to your crew's kids. She'll keep smiling and showing up and being perfect. And you'll think everything is fine because everything looks fine until it isn't. What happens when it isn't?" Mercer met his eyes. There was something in his gaze that Carrick had never seen before. Not assessment, not evaluation. Something closer to fear. When she breaks, she doesn't come back the same. She becomes someone else. Someone who believes the only way to protect the people she loves is to disappear. The words hung in the air between them. Cold, prophetic. Watch her, Mercer said. Promise me, watch her closer than she wants you to. Ask questions when she says she's fine. Push when she pulls away. Don't let her convince you everything is okay when she's drowning. I promise, Carrick said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. He would watch. He would push. He would never let her drown. But standing there on that porch, making promises he intended to keep, Carrick didn't realize the most important thing. He was already drowning in something of his own, and two people underwater can't save each other. They can only pull each other deeper. The resort contract arrived in February, 3 months after the engagement. It was the kind of opportunity that changes everything. A luxury mountain resort development in the highlands outside Asheville, 42 custom cabins, a main lodge with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the valley, a spa, a restaurant, a wedding venue designed to make people believe in forever while standing in front of mountains that had existed long before human beings learned to break each other's hearts. The project was worth more money than Carrick had made in the previous 5 years combined. It would establish Done Right Construction as a serious player in the regional market. It would pay off debts he had been carrying since his father's death. It would secure a future that had always felt precarious, always one bad contract away from collapse. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt something closer to relief. Finally, he could build something big enough to prove he was worth staying for. The logic made sense to him at the time. Provision over presence. Security over time. If he worked hard enough, if he built enough, if he stacked enough money in accounts and enough accomplishments on a resume no one would ever ask to see, then no one would ever leave again. Not Sable, not Odessa, not anyone who mattered. This was the math his childhood had taught him. Vera left because there wasn't enough. Not enough money, not enough stability, not enough reason to stay. So the solution was obvious. Become enough. Become so much that leaving would be unthinkable. He didn't realize he was building a wall while calling it a foundation. The hours stretched first. 14-hour days became 16. He left before Sable woke and returned after she was asleep. The conversations they had became logistical. Grocery lists, bill schedules, which nights she was working late at the hospital. They stopped talking about the wedding. They stopped talking about the future. They stopped talking about anything that required more than 5 minutes of sustained attention. Sable adapted the way she always adapted. Quietly, without complaint. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital because the apartment felt emptier now, and working was easier than waiting. She stopped leaving notes in his truck because he stopped coming home at times when she could place them. She went to Mercer's house more often, sitting on that porch with the peeling paint, drinking coffee and watching her father work in his garden, while something inside her slowly dimmed. Carrick didn't notice. He was too busy building cabins for strangers to see that his own house was emptying. Then Odessa fell apart. It happened in stages. First, she lost her job. A disagreement with a manager that escalated into a confrontation that escalated into a termination letter, delivered by HR, with the kind of corporate language designed to make firing someone sound like a mutual decision. Then the boyfriend left. A man Carrick had never liked, but had tolerated because Odessa seemed happy, and her happiness was rare enough to be worth protecting. Then the eviction notices started arriving. Red envelopes in a mailbox she stopped checking. Carrick found her on a Tuesday afternoon. He had driven to her apartment to drop off some tools she had borrowed and never returned. The door was unlocked. The living room was a geography of empty wine bottles and takeout containers and clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks. Odessa sat on the couch in the dim light, her hair unwashed, her eyes vacant. And in those eyes, Carrick saw something that made his blood freeze. He saw Vera, the same checked-out stare, the same slack mouth, the same sense that the person inside had temporarily vacated and left only a shell behind. His sister, who had fought so hard to be nothing like their mother, was becoming her anyway. "I need money," she said. Her voice was flat, defeated. Rent, back rent, 2 months, and the credit cards, and the electric bill. "They're going to shut everything off, Carrick. I'm going to lose the apartment and I don't have anywhere to go and I can't." She started crying. The ugly kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere too deep to clean up quickly. Carrick did the math in his head. The numbers were brutal. $12,000, maybe more. The wedding fund sat in a joint account. Sable had contributed half of it, pulling from savings she had built over years of careful budgeting. They had talked about the wedding being modest, simple, a ceremony at Mercer's house maybe, with close friends and family and a reception in the backyard. They didn't need extravagance. They just needed each other. But Odessa was drowning, and Odessa was blood, and blood came first. He transferred $12,000 into her account that evening. He didn't tell Sable. The justification felt solid at the time. He would pay it back. The resort contract would more than cover it. Sable wouldn't notice, because Sable didn't check the account regularly, and by the time she did, the money would be restored. No harm done. No conversation necessary. He was protecting his sister. He was being a good brother. He was handling it. The phone call came 3 weeks later. Odessa had called Sable to thank her. Thank her for what? Carrick asked when Odessa mentioned it in passing, confusion flickering across his face. For the money. For helping me. She called me last week and said you two had talked about it and she wanted me to know there were no hard feelings. Carrick's stomach dropped. Sable hadn't called her. Sable didn't know. Odessa had assumed they had discussed it together, had assumed this was a joint decision, had called to express gratitude for a gift that Sable never agreed to give. He drove home, knowing what was waiting. Sable sat at the kitchen table. The overhead light was off. Only the small lamp in the corner provided illumination, casting shadows that made the room feel smaller and more dangerous. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. Her face was perfectly calm. The calm was worse than anger. Anger he could have met. Anger he could have matched. This was something else. This was the stillness before structural failure. $12,000, she said. Her voice was even, controlled. From our wedding fund, given to your sister, without a conversation, without a question, without a single acknowledgement that half of that money was mine. Sable, I was going to tell you. When? The word cracked like a whip. When were you going to tell me? After you paid it back and I never noticed. After the wedding happened and you'd successfully kept me in the dark about something that involved my money, my future, my participation in a decision that should have been ours. She was in trouble, real trouble. I didn't have time to... You had time to transfer the money. You had time to drive to her apartment. You had time to figure out the logistics of saving her. Sable leaned forward, her eyes burning. You just didn't have time to pick up the phone and include me. The silence stretched. Carrick felt his defenses rising, the automatic responses that had protected him his whole life. Justify, explain, make them understand why you did what you did. But Sable wasn't finished. I'm not angry that you helped your sister. Her voice dropped lower, and somehow that made it worse. I love Odessa. I would have helped her myself if you had asked me. I would have suggested we find another way to cover the wedding or postpone it or cut costs. I would have been there, Carrick. I would have been on your team. She stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound like accusation. I'm angry that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. I'm angry that in your head, I'm still someone you have to manage instead of someone you partner with. I'm angry that after everything, after all the notes and the dinners and the names of your crew members and the cards to their children, you still don't see me as someone who belongs in your decisions. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. Coming home every night to an empty apartment because you're building a resort that matters more than building a life with me. Making excuses for you to my father because you can't be bothered to show up for Sunday dinners anymore. Lying awake until 2 a.m. wondering if you're okay, if something happened, if you'll ever come home before I have to leave for my shift. That's not fair. Carrick felt something cracking inside him. Not anger, something worse. Recognition. You don't see me, Sable said. Her voice was shaking now, the control finally slipping. You see a version of me that fits into the life you're building. A placeholder. Someone who waits patiently and smiles sweetly and never asks for more than you're willing to give. But that's not who I am. I'm a person, Carrick. I have needs, I have limits, and I am tired. She pressed her palms flat against the table, steadying herself. I am exhausted from being understanding, from being patient, from telling myself that you'll come back once the project is done, that this is temporary, that the man I fell in love with is still in there somewhere underneath all this ambition that's eating you alive. I'm exhausted from carrying this relationship by myself while you carry everything else. Mercer's warning echoed in Carrick's mind. She won't tell you when she's sinking. She'll just keep making dinner and packing lunches until she breaks. She was breaking right in front of him, and he was the water she was drowning in. Sable walked to the bedroom. The door closed with a quiet click that sounded louder than any slam. 3 days of silence followed. They moved around each other like strangers sharing a space. She slept on the far edge of the bed. He stared at the ceiling and wondered how a man could be so busy building that he failed to notice his own foundation crumbling. Now, I need you to pause for a second and really think about this. How many of you have been Carrick in this situation? How many of you have confused providing for being present? How many of you have worked so hard to secure a future that you forgot to live in the present with the people who matter? Drop a comment below and tell me, because this is the mistake that breaks more relationships than cheating ever will. The slow absence, the quiet neglect, the love that dies not from betrayal, but from starvation. And if this story is hitting home for you right now, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let's continue, because it's about to get worse. The 3 days of silence turned into a week, then 2 weeks. They existed in the same apartment like strangers sharing a waiting room. Polite, distant, careful. Sable picked up extra shifts. Carrick stayed late at the site. They passed each other in hallways and said nothing, because everything important had already been said, and nothing had changed. Then came the night she left. It started with a voicemail. He didn't answer. Carrick was standing in the skeleton of cabin 17 when his phone rang. Sable's name glowed on the screen. He stared at it for 3 rings while the city inspector droned on about fire egress codes and the gap between their actual construction and what the blueprints promised. He sent her to voicemail. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was reflex. The inspector was already irritated from the 2-hour drive and the coffee that had gone cold, and the general demeanor of a man who enjoyed finding problems more than solving them. Answering a personal call in the middle of a contentious inspection felt like handing ammunition to someone looking for reasons to fail them. He would call her back. He always called her back. Eventually, the voicemail notification appeared 20 minutes later. He didn't listen to it. The inspection dragged on until nearly midnight. A marathon of revisions and concessions and barely concealed hostility that left Carrick exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor. He drove home through mountain roads that twisted like questions he didn't want to answer. The headlights cut through darkness that felt thicker than usual, more substantial, like the night itself was trying to slow him down. The apartment was dark when he arrived. This wasn't unusual. Sable often worked late shifts. He assumed she was at the hospital, assumed the silence was normal, assumed everything was fine because assuming was easier than investigating. He walked into the kitchen to get water. The refrigerator light spilled across the floor when he opened it. And that's when he saw it. A plate wrapped in foil. Chicken. He could smell the garlic through the aluminum. The garlic chicken she made when she wanted to remind him of something. When she wanted to reach back to the beginning of them and pull it forward into the present. Next to the plate, a note. Carrick's hand trembled as he picked it up. The paper was plain, torn from a notebook. Her handwriting was smaller than usual, cramped, like she had been trying to fit too many words into too little space. Carrick, I made your favorite. The garlic chicken, the one from that night with the smoke alarms and the cereal on the porch. I was going to wait up for you. I was going to try one more time to tell you what I've been trying to tell you for months. But you didn't answer. I called you. I needed to hear your voice. I needed to know that somewhere in the middle of all those cabins and contracts and deadlines, you still remember that I exist, that I'm not just a placeholder waiting for you to finish becoming whoever you think you need to become. You sent me to voicemail. I understand that the inspection was important. I understand that your work matters. I've always understood that. I have been understanding for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be understood in return. I can't do this anymore. Loving you is making me disappear. Every day, a little more of me evaporates. The parts that laugh easily. The parts that believe people stay. The parts that used to leave notes in your truck because it made me happy to know you'd find them. Those parts are gone now. And I don't know how to get them back while I'm still here, waiting for you to see me. My mother left when I was 9. She walked out and never came back. I have spent my entire adult life terrified of becoming her, terrified of being someone who leaves, terrified of being the reason someone else wakes up in an empty house wondering what they did wrong. But staying is killing me, Carrick. Staying is turning me into someone I don't recognize. And I would rather leave while I still have some of myself left than stay until there's nothing left to save. Don't look for me. Please, I know you'll want to fix this. I know you'll want to show up with apologies and promises and plans. But this isn't something you can fix. This is something that's already broken. And I'm the only one who can put myself back together. I love you. I love you the stupid kind of way. The kind that doesn't make sense. The kind that still believes in smoke alarms and cereal on porches and writing numbers on receipts. I will love you like that for the rest of my life, but I can't be with you anymore. Goodbye, Carrick. Sable. The note fell from his fingers. It landed on the counter next to the chicken that had gone cold. He called her once, twice, 7 times, 10. The phone rang through to voicemail every time, her voice on the recording sounding like a ghost of itself. The 17th call went straight to voicemail without ringing. The 18th call didn't connect at all. Number disconnected. Please check the number and try again. She had changed her number. She had erased herself from his contact list with the same surgical precision she had used to erase herself from his life. Carrick drove to Mercer's house. It was 3 a.m. when he pulled into the driveway. The lights were on in the living room. Mercer was still awake, sitting in the same chair where he had sat during that engagement dinner, the same glass of bourbon resting on the table beside him. He answered the door before Carrick could knock. The old man's face held no surprise, only a grief so deep and so familiar that it made Carrick's chest cave in. "She's gone," Carrick said. Mercer nodded slowly. "I know. Do you know where?" "I know where she was planning to go. I'm not going to tell you." "Mercer, please." "No." The word was gentle but absolute. "I told you, son. I warned you. Watch for it. See her. Don't let her convince you everything's okay when she's drowning." "I was trying to build something." "You were building cabins." Mercer's voice cracked. "You were building a resort. You were building a business and a bank account and a future made of lumber and contracts. But you weren't building anything with her. You were just expecting her to be there when you finished." The truth hit Carrick like a physical blow. "She doesn't need you to fix it," Mercer continued. "That's what you never understood. She didn't need solutions. She needed presence. She needed someone to sit in the dark with her when the dark got too heavy. She needed someone to answer the phone when she called at midnight, because she was lonely and afraid and wondering if she still mattered. I love her. I know you do." Mercer's eyes were wet. "But love without attention is just a word. And she's had enough words. She's had a lifetime of words from people who loved her but couldn't be bothered to show up." He stepped back. His hand moved toward the door. "Go home, Carrick. Give her space. If she wants to find you, she knows where you are." The door closed. Carrick stood on that porch for 20 minutes. He stared at the wood grain of the door. He counted the knots in the panels. He memorized the way the porch light cast shadows on the welcome mat that suddenly felt like the least welcoming thing in the world. He drove home. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, the first grey suggestion of a dawn that felt like an insult. He sat in his truck in the parking lot of his apartment building. He pulled out his phone. He opened the voicemail notification from hours earlier, the one he had sent to voicemail while standing in cabin 17. He pressed play. "Hey, it's me." Her voice filled the truck. He pressed the phone against his ear like he was trying to absorb it through his skin. "I made garlic chicken, the good kind. The one that set off all those smoke alarms, remember? We ate cereal on the porch in our underwear, and you said it was the best meal you'd ever had because we were together, and that was all that mattered. A pause. He could hear her breathing. He could hear the tremble underneath the words. I'm calling because I needed to hear your voice. Because the bed has been cold for weeks now and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter. Because I love you, Carrick. I love you the stupid kind of way, the kind that doesn't make sense, the kind that believes in things even when those things stop believing back. Another pause. Longer, this time. I don't know if you're going to call me back. I don't know if you're going to come home tonight or tomorrow or next week. I just know that I'm here. I'm still here. And I'm asking you one more time to see me before I forget what it feels like to be seen. The voicemail ended. 37 seconds. He played it again, and again, and again. The message that had been a communication became a memorial. The voice that had been alive became a relic. The woman who had been his future became the past tense he would carry for the next 4 years. He had missed his last chance to answer, and she had gone. 4 years is a long time to grieve someone who isn't dead. The resort project finished 8 months after Sable left. The cabins rose from the mountain like monuments to something Carrick no longer remembered wanting. The grand opening featured local politicians and regional press, and a champagne toast that tasted like sawdust in his mouth. The money arrived in deposits that should have felt like victory, but instead felt like a receipt for something he had purchased at too high a cost. He paid off every debt. He caught up on taxes that had accumulated during lean years. He put enough into savings that his accountant started talking about investment strategies and retirement portfolios and all the things stable people worried about. He had never felt less stable in his life. The house came next. The house they had designed together on napkins during late nights at diners and early mornings in bed. The wraparound porch she had described while tracing her finger along the edge of a breakfast menu. The kitchen with enough counter space to spread out while cooking. The kind of kitchen that invited people to gather and stay. The backyard with the old oak tree, perfect for the tire swing they had talked about installing someday when there were children to swing on it. He bought the house. He furnished it. He filled it with everything she had ever mentioned wanting. And then he lived in it alone. The master bedroom faced east because she had said she wanted to wake up with the sun. The guest room was painted a soft green because she had once mentioned that green was calming and guest rooms should feel like rest, not afterthought. The kitchen had a gas stove because she loved the control of open flame, loved watching fire respond to her adjustments in real time. He didn't cook. He ordered takeout and ate it standing over the sink, a man haunting his own dream house like a ghost who had forgotten to leave. Odessa got sober 18 months after Sable left. The crisis that had cost Carrick his relationship became the wake-up call that saved his sister's life. She checked into a treatment facility. She stayed for 90 days. She came out quieter, more careful, with a clarity in her eyes that made her look like a different person. She got her real estate license. She started working for a small agency in West Asheville. She rebuilt her credit score one payment at a time. She stopped drinking entirely. Not even wine at dinner. Not even champagne at celebrations. And she carried a guilt she never spoke about. Carrick could see it in the way she looked at him sometimes, the way her eyes would flicker to the empty ring finger on his left hand and then quickly away. She never mentioned Sable. Neither did he. The name existed in the space between them like a wound they had agreed not to touch. He didn't date. Friends tried to set him up. Co-workers mentioned sisters and cousins and women from their gym who were really great once you got to know them. He went on 3 dates in 4 years. Each one felt like a performance in a language he no longer spoke. The women were fine, pleasant, attractive, interesting in ways that should have mattered. But every conversation felt like translation. Every laugh felt like mimicry. Every moment of connection felt like a pale copy of something he had already experienced in its original form. Sable had ruined him for other people. Not through any fault of hers, but because once you have known someone who makes you feel like yourself, everyone else feels like pretending. The voicemail became the only constant. Every time he upgraded his phone, he backed it up first. Triple redundancy, cloud storage, external hard drive. A flash drive that lived in his sock drawer like a secret he was keeping from himself. The 37 seconds of her voice became the most protected data in his life, more secure than his financial records, more carefully preserved than any contract or document or professional archive. He wondered about her constantly, where she was, what she was doing, whether she was safe, whether she was happy, whether she ever lay awake at night and thought about garlic chicken and smoke alarms, and a man who hadn't answered the phone. He hoped she was happy. He needed to believe she was happy. Because if her leaving had served some purpose, if it had led her somewhere better, then maybe his failure hadn't been entirely in vain. Maybe the worst thing he ever did had somehow resulted in something good for her. But beneath that hope lived a smaller, uglier feeling, a selfish ache that whispered in the dark. The hope that she hadn't forgotten him. The hope that somewhere in whatever new life she had built, there was still a room with his name on it. A memory she protected the way he protected her voicemail. Thursday evening in October arrived like any other Thursday. Carrick came home from the job site at 7:15. He ate leftover pasta standing over the sink. He watched television without registering what was on the screen. He checked his phone for emails and found nothing important. At 11:47, he played the voicemail. 37 seconds. Her voice in his ear. The garlic chicken, the cold bed, the stupid kind of love. He fell asleep with the phone on his chest. At 2:47 in the morning, it rang. Unknown number. His first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. Recorded love was less dangerous than the living kind. Voicemails could be controlled, played and replayed, preserved in amber. Living calls required participation. They demanded presence. They could hurt in ways that recordings couldn't. But something made him answer. Some pull that had no name. Some gravity that existed outside of logic. He pressed the green button, and the world he had built for 4 years came crashing down around him. The voice on the other end was small. So small it barely registered as human. Hello? Carrick sat up in bed, disoriented, the phone pressed to his ear. The clock on his nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. His heart was pounding before his brain caught up with why. Hello? The voice said again. A child. A very young child. Are you Carrick? His blood turned to ice. Something in his chest shifted, rearranged itself into a configuration that made breathing suddenly difficult. Yes, he managed. This is Carrick. Who is this? A pause. He could hear breathing. The shallow, hiccuping rhythm of someone who had been crying for a long time and had now entered that exhausted calm that follows terror. My name is Eliana. I'm 3. His hand gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. Eliana. A name he had never heard before. A name that didn't exist in any database of his memory. And yet something about the way it was spoken, the cadence, the soft lilt at the end, triggered a recognition so deep it felt genetic. Eliana, he repeated. His voice sounded foreign to himself. How did you get this number? Mummy told me. If something bad happens, I press the star on her phone. The star goes to you. The room tilted. The walls leaned inward. The ceiling pressed down. Carrick felt the architecture of his reality shifting around him, every assumption he had carried for 4 years suddenly unstable. The star goes to you. Sable had programmed his number into her phone. She had marked it with a star. She had taught her daughter, her 3-year-old daughter, that if something bad happened, if everything went wrong, there was one person to call, one name, one number. His. Eliana, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Where is your mummy right now? The silence that followed contained everything. It contained 4 years of unanswered questions. It contained every night he had fallen asleep to a voicemail and wondered where she was. It contained the gap between a woman who had said, "Don't look for me," and a woman who had made sure her daughter knew exactly how to find him. Mummy's not waking up. The phone slipped from his hand. He caught it before it hit the floor. His fingers fumbled against the screen, slick with sudden sweat. He pressed it back to his ear, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his temples. Eliana, listen to me. This is very important. Where is Mummy? What room is she in? The kitchen. She was making me cereal because I couldn't sleep, and then she just fall down, and she won't wake up. I shaked her, and she won't wake up. The grammar broke him. Falled down. Shaked her. A 3-year-old constructing sentences around a horror she didn't have language for. Carrick was on his feet, shoving his feet into boots, grabbing keys from the hook by the door. His mind was fracturing into multiple channels. Call 911. Trace the call. Find the address. Get help. Keep her talking. Don't let her be alone. Eliana, you did something very brave by calling me. Very, very brave. I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? Can you do that? Okay. Is the front door locked? I don't know. That's okay. It's okay. Are there any adults in the house besides Mommy? No. Just me and Mommy. Sable had a daughter. Sable had been living somewhere with a daughter named Eliana, a daughter she had hidden from him for 4 years, a daughter who was now alone in a house with her unconscious mother and didn't know what to do except press the star on the phone. And the star went to him. The realizations crashed over Carrick like waves, each one more devastating than the last. Sable had kept his number after "Don't call me." After the disconnected phone line, after vanishing so completely that he had started to doubt his memories, she had kept him programmed into her phone. Starred, protected, the emergency contact. She had taught her daughter his name. At 3 years old, Eliana knew the word Carrick. She knew it well enough to ask for him, to recognize that the voice answering belonged to the name her mother had spoken, which meant Sable had talked about him. In whatever life she had built, whatever place she had gone to rebuild herself, his name had been spoken aloud. His existence had been preserved. Carrick? Eliana's voice was smaller now, tireder, the kind of exhaustion that came from terror burning itself out. Are you still there? I'm still here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I'm coming to help. I promise. He had 911 on his landline, the ancient phone plugged into the wall that he kept for emergencies he never believed would come. He gave them what he had. A child named Eliana, a mother unconscious on a kitchen floor, an unknown number that his carrier would need to trace. He begged them to hurry. Can you tell me your address, Eliana? Do you know where you live? My house. Do you know the name of your street? The one with the big tree. 3 years old, she knew what she knew, which wasn't enough. But the 911 operator was working with the carrier, triangulating the cell tower, narrowing down the location. They would find her. They had to find her. Eliana, can you tell me about your mummy? What does she look like? She has brown hair, and she wears the dog clothes sometimes. Dog clothes. Scrubs with cartoon dogs on them. Does she work at a hospital? She helps sick kids feel better. Pediatric nurse. Still a pediatric nurse. Some things hadn't changed. What about you? Do you go to school? Preschool. I know my letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. She sang the alphabet song. Her voice was tiny and off-key, and the most beautiful thing Carrick had ever heard because it meant she was still there, still conscious, still connected to him through this thin line of cellular signal. The 911 operator's voice crackled through the landline. They had an address, a small apartment complex in South Asheville, 12 minutes from his house. Paramedics were already en route. Eliana, there are people coming to help Mommy. They're going to knock on your door very soon. When they do, I need you to open it for them, okay? Okay. Can you go sit by the front door and wait for them? I don't want to leave Mommy. I know, sweetheart. I know. But the helpers need to be able to get inside. Can you be brave for me? Can you go to the door? He heard movement, small feet on what sounded like linoleum, a door opening, the sound of her sitting down. I'm at the door. You're doing so good, Eliana. You're being so brave. Your mummy is going to be so proud of you. Through the landline, he could hear sirens approaching. Through the cell phone, he could hear Eliana start to cry again. They're here, she whispered. The loud trucks are here. That's good. That means help is here. When they knock, you open the door, okay? The knock came, loud, authoritative. Eliana screamed. "It's okay," Carrick said, his own voice breaking. "It's okay. They're the good guys. They're here to help. Open the door, Eliana. Please." He heard the door open. Adult voices flooding in. Someone asking Eliana if she was hurt. Someone else calling for medical equipment. Radio chatter. Controlled chaos. A female paramedic's voice came through the phone. "Sir? Are you the one who called this in?" "Yes. The mother, is she?" "We're working on her now. Are you family?" Family. The word hung in the air. What was he? The ex-boyfriend from 4 years ago? The emergency contact? The star on the phone? It's complicated. But the little girl, Eliana, she knows me, she called me. Where are you taking them? Mission Hospital. We're transporting now. Mission Hospital, where Sable worked, where her colleagues would see her come in on a stretcher, where everything would change. "I'm coming," he said. "Tell Eliana I'm coming." He heard the paramedic relay the message, heard Eliana's voice, small and hopeful. "Carrick's coming." "I'm coming, sweetheart," he said into the phone. "I'll be right there, I promise." The line went dead. They were in the ambulance now, focused on medicine, not phone calls. Carrick stood in his hallway, keys in hand, the reality of what had just happened crashing over him. Sable had a daughter, a 3-year-old daughter named Eliana, who knew his name and had his number starred in her mother's phone. The timeline meant Sable had been pregnant when she left, or had become pregnant shortly after. The math was unclear, the possibilities numerous, the questions endless. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that a little girl was scared and alone, and had called him because her mother had programmed his number with a star. What mattered was that Sable was unconscious on a kitchen floor, or maybe now in an ambulance, or maybe already at the hospital. What mattered was that after 4 years of silence, after "Don't Look For Me," after the disconnection and the vanishing and the 37-second voicemail played on repeat, she had still made him the person to call when everything fell apart. The voicemail transformed in his mind. For 4 years, he had listened to it as an ending, a goodbye, a final message from someone who was done. But now, standing in his dark hallway with a child's voice still echoing in his ears, and a terror so profound it felt like dying, he understood something different. It wasn't an ending. It was a placeholder. Sable had said, "Don't look for me." But she had also made sure that if she ever needed him, he could be found. She had built a bridge she never intended to cross, but kept it intact anyway, just in case. Just in case the day came when everything fell apart, and the only person she trusted with her daughter was the man she had told to forget her. The garlic chicken line floated up from his memory, the voicemail he had listened to thousands of times. "I love you the stupid kind of way, the kind that doesn't make sense, the kind that believes in things even when those things stop believing back." The love had never really gone cold. It had just been waiting for the right voice to call it home. "Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this." She left. She disconnected her number. She told him never to come looking, but she programmed his number under a star on her phone and taught her 3-year-old daughter to press it if something went wrong. What does that tell you about love? What does that tell you about the people who leave but never actually let go? Drop your answer in the comments. I need to hear what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're going to want to be here for part 2, because this story is just getting started. Let me tell you what this story has been about, not the voicemail, not the phone call, not the 3-year-old girl with her mother on a kitchen floor. Those are the events, the skeleton, but the story, the real story, lives in the space between the bones. This is a story about presence. Carrick Dunn built a resort. He built cabins and lodges, and a business that made him successful by every standard the world measures success by. But while he was building all of that, he forgot to be present with the woman who loved him. He confused providing for showing up. He thought that if he worked hard enough, if he secured enough of a future, then the present would take care of itself. It doesn't work that way. You can build someone a house, but still leave them homeless if you're never in it. You can give someone everything they need and still starve them of the one thing they actually wanted. You, your attention, your time, your presence when the world gets heavy and they need someone to sit in the dark with them. Carrick learned this too late. Most people do. This is also a story about generational trauma. Watch the patterns. Carrick's mother, Vera, used to disappear. She would say, "I love you," and then vanish for months, leaving two children to piece together their own survival. Carrick grew up terrified of being left, and that fear turned into a different kind of absence. He didn't physically leave, he just stopped being present. Different method, same wound. And Sable. Sable's mother walked out when she was 9. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Sable spent her whole life terrified of becoming that person. And then, when staying started to kill her, she did exactly what her mother did. She left, she vanished. She wrote a note and walked out the door because she didn't know any other way to save herself. The trauma handed down like inheritance. The patterns repeating like a song no one remembers learning. This is a story about silent suffering. Sable never screamed. She never threw things. She never issued ultimatums or demanded attention or made herself impossible to ignore. She just adapted. She picked up extra shifts. She stopped leaving notes. She went to her father's house and watched him garden while the light inside her dimmed. The people who leave quietly are the ones who tried the longest. Remember that. The ones who explode, who fight, who make noise, they're still engaged. They still believe something can change. But the ones who go silent, the ones who stop asking for what they need, they've already started leaving. They're just waiting for their body to catch up with their heart. Mercer warned Carrick. He said she wouldn't tell you when she's sinking. He said she would keep making dinner and packing lunches until she broke. And Carrick heard the words but didn't feel them. He thought he would notice. He thought love was enough to make him pay attention. It wasn't. And this is a story about love that doesn't die. The star button. That small piece of data on a phone. A single character that meant, if everything falls apart, call this man. Sable left. She disconnected her number. She told Carrick never to look for her. By every reasonable interpretation, she was done. She had walked away and closed the door and moved on with her life. But she kept his number. She starred it. She taught her daughter to press it in an emergency. Leaving isn't always the opposite of loving. Sometimes people leave because they love too much, because staying is destroying them, and they know that destruction will eventually destroy the person they love too. Sometimes departure is protection, misguided maybe, painful certainly, but protection nonetheless. Sable's star button proves something important. Love doesn't die just because a relationship ends. It relocates. It hides in phone settings and emergency protocols and the way we talk about someone to our children years after they've gone from our daily lives. So let me leave you with some questions. What would you do if you got that call? If the phone rang at 2 a.m. and a child's voice said your name and you realized that someone you loved, someone you lost, someone you thought had forgotten you, had kept you as their emergency? Could you show up? Would you? Could you forgive someone who left? Could you forgive yourself for being the reason they did? These questions don't have easy answers. That's why they matter. This story isn't finished. Eliana's call isn't the end. It's the beginning of part 2. There's more to come. More about who Sable became in those 4 years. More about who Eliana is and what she represents. More about whether two people who broke each other can find a way to put each other back together. But for now, I want you to sit with what you've heard. If this story touched something in you tonight, and I have a feeling it did, do me a favor, hit that like button. It takes half a second, but it tells the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be heard. Leave a comment telling me who you related to most. Carrick, who loved but couldn't show up. Sable, who stayed until staying started killing her. Odessa, who was terrified of losing the only family she had. Or Mercer, who saw everything coming and couldn't stop it. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be Carrick right now, working too hard, forgetting to come home. Someone who might be Sable, drowning quietly, waiting to be seen. Someone who might need to hear that it's not too late to answer the phone. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because part 2 of this story is coming, and I promise you, it's going to break you open and put you back together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about a story that's really about all of us, about the ways we love badly and leave too soon and hold on to voicemails because we're not ready to let go. Remember this: the people who love you, the stupid kind of way, the kind that doesn't make sense, the kind that believes in things even when those things stop believing back, don't make them disappear. See them while they're still standing in front of you. Answer the phone while they're still calling. I'll see you in the next one.